For more than 20 years, Shary Brown helped to manage the Ann Arbor Art Fairs and direct the Ann Arbor Street Art Fair. In that time, all of the events earned renown as some of the top 10 art fests in the United States. Shary's skills in helping to form and fashion the venerable Ann Arbor events were earned throughout her diverse professional experiences, working as a lawyer, a company bookkeeper, and a salesperson. Additionally, her dedication to making a difference in her hometown was part of a family tradition, as her grandfather, William Brown, Jr., once served as mayor of Ann Arbor. Most essentially, Shary's enthusiastic and playful nature are what transformed her into the fairy godmother of the Ann Arbor Street Art Fair, and ultimately into the city's Art Festival queen.
When you run events, you either just love it or it's the most awful thing in the world. So, I mean, I fell into this, but as it turns out, as I went on and learned more about myself and more about what the job required, you have to be really quite good at a lot of things. You don't have to be the best at any one thing. So you have to be able to think really big picture. You have to be able to envision. So you have to know where you want to go.
And are both of these not-for-profit organizations that run
Yes.
this? So you had a board to answer to.
Yes.
At the end of each year, did you always have to sit down and do a full review and come up with new ideas? Did they expect you to expand and improve it, or did they want you to keep the status quo?
That was the balance. The original show had just so many remarkable traditions, where it was a national leader in so many categories. Yet, in order to keep the audience interested and then thus supporting these artists, you have to be able to say what's new each year. I mean, the media won't cover you unless if it's the same old thing.
Give them a new story. How many years were you in charge of the second art fair?
I think 12.
And in those 12 years,
12
did you start the day after it finished to try to think what you would do new and different for the following year? Was it that kind of a competitive situation?
You actually, when you run annual events, you actually start a little before. It's a little more than an annual process. Some of them are pretty simple decisions, like confirming your dates for a year out, because while you have about a week's worth of attention, people ask you all kinds of questions that you need answers to.
I see. You mean when people are actually here for the event, they're wanting to know details.
When are you going to be here? What are the dates next year? But you also have one opportunity to evaluate what you do. And if you know where you're going the next year, or if you have an idea of where you're going the next year, you only have those few days while it's up and running to say, if we did that then, what would it look like?
Right.
What could we bring to it? What would it affect? What would we lose if we're going to do that? Is it worth it? How does it fit?
Were you pretty much the brain for the ideas, or was it a collaborative effort with your board, or how did you evolve those, if we could do this, would it work, ideas?
Well, I always had, I call them, bookshelves full of ideas.
That's awesome.
I mean, I have some that have been sitting there for, 10 or 15 years when they finally got implemented. I think even boards of directors, their job is to make sure that the organization is run with fiscal responsibility and accountability, and that we are meeting our mission. Mm-hmm. So they look at what I proposed to them. How does that fit within our mission? How does that move us forward? And if it's a little off kilter with the mission, maybe our mission needs to be adjusted. So we would have really interesting conversations about that. But I think most of the specifics would come from staff. When I started, the woman over from, who had been my friend and run that organization as my compatriot for 12 or 13 years. She was part-time the entire time that I worked with her, and had just proposed to the board that they hire her full-time, and so she'd only been full-time for a few months when she left. So I became the first full-time director, really, that they ever had when the fair was about to turn 40 years old. But I was used to having a staff, so I went from having, 3 or 4 people working with me in various roles to myself.
Was it a little scary?
I think my husband worried, would I do well all by myself in an office? I actually did. I loved it.
You were fine.
And hired my first intern because I was used to also, the grand benefit of the university is you have all these really smart people and young people who are looking for experience and looking to try something different.
So 12 years you stay in this position as well? So you're in the 2000s now? 2000.
Yes.
And why do you leave?
I turned 60 and the fair turned 50, so we were going to do this big blowout 50th anniversary celebration. And it just seemed right. I looked at my friends all over the country who were running major events all over the country, and I couldn't find anybody who was, even 15 years close to me in age. It's a young person's.
Well, it takes a lot.
Yeah, it's we
It's
worked
draining.
hard, and I thought I'd brought pretty much everything I could bring to it. There were other things I wanted to do. That was in 2009, so you can imagine what our grand blowout 50th anniversary was like. It was right after it was the crash.
Oh, no.
It was the 2008 housing bubble. So we had added, I think, $100,000 to our budget. We had all these programs that we were going to develop for the next 50 years, some of which we'd sort of built in and gotten started over the few years before that. But it was going to be a celebration of the history, we had all these programs, and so when all of the corporate money dried up, nobody was donating money. People were quite worried. So I think I did 3 separate budgets at some point during that year because I had announced that I was leaving, and I had fully intended to do that. I still intended to do that, but it made our financial calculations very different. We didn't know how long this was going to last. We didn't know if corporate money would come back. We didn't know if private donors would come back. We didn't know if the artists would survive because nobody was buying art.
How much did your budget get slashed that year then?
Our grand celebration turned out to be 3 panels that we created about the history of the art fair, which were great. They were really interesting. We had a ton of fun doing them. But they were 3 graphic panels.
Wow.
That was the total celebration, other than creating a little logo that said, "Hey, we're 50." So we paid a graphic designer a little bit, and the sign guy donated the signs, and that was our celebration. But I also wanted to leave the organization with a reasonable reserve. So I didn't want to touch the reserve to do any of this, and the reserve needed to be at least 1/3 of our operating budget. So we probably cut our operating budget by, 30-40%.
That's huge.
Yeah. But we left our reserve.
And got through. So when you retired, I assume you retired after the show, or was it at the end of the year?
I retired in September.
And your show is when?
Is in July. One of the most important things is to wrap it up. So clean up, make sure that all the equipment and signs and tents and things are washed and put away and repaired or given away or discarded if they've ended their useful life.
Got it.
Taking inventory, understanding what you're going to need for the next year so you can budget well. write all the thank you letters that you need to write, the hundreds and hundreds of thank you letters you need to write, and all the reports to the people who invested in you.
How long would it take you to wrap up this fair? This art fair?
A couple months.
Yeah.
A couple months.
I bet.